Hi, this is John Ederola. I'm at the Democratic Unity Reform Commission meeting, and we're speaking with Lucy Flores, a member of the commission. I had some questions about the possible reforms of the superdelegate system. I know that there was a preview of some of the work that's being done, but I had some follow-up questions. There was a little bit of vague language from one of your coworkers. So right now, in broad strokes, what is the idea going forward for superdelegates?
Well, the idea going forward is that everyone on the commission acknowledges that the system needs change. What we're dealing with right now is that the Superdelegate Mandate that was agreed to by both the Sanders campaign and the Clinton campaign after convention gave some very specific language in terms of what they agreed should happen with superdelegates.
Like what?
Part of that was that it created essentially these two categories of superdelegates. Ones that were elected officials, former chairs, basically people with titles, right? And then another category that was kind of everybody else. And everybody else would be bound by the outcome of their state's contest, and those with the titles would not. They still kind of retained their I can do whatever I want superdelegate status, right? Which was essentially part of the problem we were trying to address with superdelegates. So everyone agrees that that language is very problematic, but that is what the two campaigns agreed to. So we are in a process now of kind of trying to figure out, okay, how do we come up with something that isn't this language, that is fair, that addresses, this problem of having superdelegates counted by the press when they shouldn't be, and having this undue influence, etc. Like, we all recognize that those are problems, and so this is a good thing because there wasn't that much discussion about superdelegates, and the reason why is because literally everyone on the committee understands that this is a problem, we have to figure this out, and this language, unfortunately, is not the solution.
So as of right now, I know we're still months away from any formal recommendations. Splitting it into that two-pronged approach, that's not what's likely to happen going forward?
Well, we are, and I know you don't want vague answers, and I'm not intentionally giving vague answers. It's just that is literally what we're working through right now, and kind of like we're in a race against the time as we head into December. But I can assure you that everyone, the reason why there wasn't any discussion about it is because everyone agrees that at least how it's proposed now, having the people with titles unbound and the people without titles bound, just doesn't make a lot of sense.
And hypothetically, if that was the case, what's the distribution between those two? Is it a 50-50 thing? Is it a 10-90 thing?
It's I would say like a 70-30, maybe 80-20.
70-30 named?
So because the elected officials, that pool is significantly smaller than the unpledged folks, right? So it's like 700. I think it's like 700, but don't quote me on that. But the number is significantly bigger for those who would be bound by the outcome of their states than those who wouldn't. But those who wouldn't are people with, really enormous bully pulpits, right? They're governors, they're congresspeople, they're former presidents, they're former speakers of the House. I mean, they're very influential people, and at the end of the day, their voices reach a lot more people than, the everyday person.
Yeah,
so.
and of course people would want to know what the enforcement mechanism for you have to vote in accordance, if you don't, what happens? And if the media does try to reach out to them and they imply that they might not go with the will of their voters, what's the consequence? So overall, though, I have
you see the complexity of this. Why
we're
having issues.
And also, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, of the potential consequences, because this is one of the most high-profile demanded reforms. People are not. I mean, it wasn't just this last cycle, it was the cycle before that, too. It can work in multiple directions. People hate this system. They think it's inherently undemocratic, big and little d. And so I know that you said that everybody agrees that change needs to happen, but is the change 10% less less influence for superdelegates? Is it because many people want zero superdelegates, and they will see anything short of that as insufficient?
Well, and unfortunately, look, I am not going to mislead anybody. I will be perfectly honest all the time, and we are not going to get to a place where there's no superdelegates. We're not going to get rid of them. So, and I know that there's some people who are going to be really upset about that and who don't want any superdelegates at all. I get it. That's not what's happening.
What's the argument being put to you in these working groups to not remove it?
Well, because, superdelegates function in many different ways. I mean, there's so much history behind superdelegates, right? And their role and what they do, and, essentially providing a little bit of, not even a firewall, but just a sense of direction there's a valid argument to be made that Congress people and governors, et cetera, know the presidential candidates on a far more personal level than, kind of everyday folks will ever get to know those people. And so, their opinion...
But that was the argument for state legislators to choose senators back in the day. I mean, eventually we have to respect the will of the voters to choose people.
Correct, absolutely. But there's a lot of valid arguments that some superdelegates should stay, right? But ultimately, everyone agrees that yes, the influence is totally out of control at this point, And look, the only reason why this is even a conversation is because of the way that it panned out in just this last election. Prior to that, not a whole lot of people would really even know.
Well, I know that the Obama campaign was not happy back in 2008.
That's exactly right, because that's the last time that superdelegates played even a slightly outsized role in a campaign, right?
Well, in this last campaign.
That's right. And
yeah.
it was,
so that's the last 2 out of 2.
Well, it was to the detriment. Well, I mean, if you don't count as reelect, but that was to the detriment then at that time of Hillary Clinton, right, and not Obama. So yes, but even then, most people would not know what a superdelegate is or what role they play, and this time they do because of what happened this last time around. Totally valid, totally fair, and we should be taking that into consideration, and we are working on reducing what I think everybody agrees is this undue influence, or I would say a larger influence than they should have.
Okay, well, I will be very eagerly awaiting the recommendations from the Commission. I know that a lot of our viewers will be. Yeah, well, thank you for speaking with us.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So I just spoke with Lucy Flores, and we were talking about the superdelegate system. And it turns out that a lot of what was talked about during the big Commission meeting about the possible reforms to the superdelegate system is what they're working on the one hand. On the other hand, they're totally not actually going to do that, which I understand that many of our viewers want one thing. They want the total destruction of the superdelegates, and I agree with that. But what they proposed, depending on how the numbers broke up, I think would allay a lot of concerns about the outsized influence of the superdelegates. I mean, right now there's 722. That is 15% of all the delegates. It's 1/3 of what you need to actually win, which I think anybody can look at that and say that's ridiculous. But if only 10% of those were still unpledged, well, then it would be 1.5%, and it would be, obviously a much smaller percentage of what you need to win. That would be improvement. It wouldn't be everything, but it would be something. And from what Lucy Flores was saying, maybe we end up with something even better than that. That seems to be what she wants. But maybe we end up with absolutely nothing in the end, and that I don't think is going to satisfy absolutely anybody, myself or many of you in the audience.